Hey guys, welcome back to the Friday Vlog, where we discuss activity that goes on here with the BuzWeaver channel. That includes things like current events, headlines that are in the news, pop culture, social media, technology, and items of interest that come up during the week that allow us to have a little bit of a dialogue. It's a little stormy out, so you might hear a little bit of background ambient noise, but I do want to thank all of you guys on Odyssey, Rumble, and BitChute for your continued participation, and of course all of you here on YouTube. I want to thank all of you guys for your continued support. So here we are on Friday, New Year's Eve, and we are about to walk into another new year. And what is interesting is, what can we anticipate in this coming year? Of course, as we've always covered here on the channel, at least as you saw earlier this week when I talked about the cancellation of flights and then the cancellation of certain New Year's Eve celebrations throughout the world and including here in the United States, I kind of anticipate we're going to see something very similar, particularly since we are approaching the midterms. So the curious thing here for me is going to be, what sort of variant, what sort of scheme, what sort of plan are the Democrats going to have during the midterms? Because, of course, they are going to want to focus on mail-in ballots. And you guys may be wondering, well, why is mail-in ballots so important? Well, you have to remember, here in the United States, cities, for the most part, very dense areas of cities, for example, typically have far more Democrats. So some people argue that we don't really have blue states in the United States. We have blue cities. Now, of course, the cities are very important. And many people were a little confused as to why, when they saw the actual map of the United States, it was so red and in these little tiny spots of blue that enabled, of course, Joe Biden to win. And that is because many of the cities, it's much easier, for example, for people to go out and do canvassing in a city because they can go to, a large apartment building and just go floor to floor. But when you talk about more conservatives, for example, people out there that are a little more grassroots, even those individuals who are kind of more centrist or even libertarian, they're not necessarily going to be in cities. They're going to be out in the suburb areas, maybe in rural areas. And so it's a little harder to get in contact with those people. But in most cases, some of them also are politically active. So it's really going to be how many people can be activated. But even now, right now, hearing from Democrats that I personally know who were, Trump detractors, are starting to understand, are starting to be kind of disillusioned by what has happened. Now, of course, we've warned all these individuals that this was going to happen, as well as President Trump during the campaign. So what I'm seeing for this particular coming year of 2022 is perhaps a big turnaround for Republicans. Now, I have my issues with the GOP as well. We need individuals like Ron DeSantis and Greg Abbott in Texas, or DeSantis from Florida. We need Republicans like these men to set examples of leadership to show that we can go in a forward direction. But as I have told you since we started, since the campaign of President Trump, is that the establishment was looking, and has been for the 4 years during President Trump's administration, were trying to get him out because they wanted to be back in charge. That's who's in charge now. We tried to explain this to the Democrats. We tried to explain this to the left, who can be difficult to explain anything to when it comes to anything remotely rational or cogent or substantive. But nonetheless, they're now seeing it. There is no way to ignore the fact that we have higher taxes, and that, of course, is to pay for a lot of the free vaccines and the free kits, because, of course, nothing is actually free, and the pharmaceuticals aren't about to volunteer anything to anyone, which is another part of the establishment, which is the pharmaceuticals, who President Trump was also holding back. And, of course, it was his warp speed that got us to the vaccine, although I would not anticipate President Trump, telling frontline workers that their jobs would be in peril, or they'd have to make an ultimatum to have a procedure done to their person to be able to keep their jobs. That's absurd. Think about it. You hear the left constantly talking about the pandemic is causing all this. No, what's causing this is bad decisions in a pandemic, like raising taxes. And think about it. Here you have these medical workers who are working on the front lines before the vaccine, exercising pandemic protocols before the vaccine, and now suddenly there's the vaccine, but the protocols aren't as important, the protocols don't work, or nothing has really changed. They could still exercise the same protocols, which would not require that they make an ultimatum and have shots to be able to perform their jobs. It's understandable they work in an environment where they're more exposed to this, but we are still a constitutional republic. What happens in our country, whether it's business or private business or industry, doesn't change the Constitution, doesn't change our laws. We are still Americans at the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, at the middle of the day. We're still Americans. So I anticipate that the Democrats will continue with this pandemic narrative that they're on, because as you can see now, the media is completely focused on it. As we talked about earlier this week with the cancellation of flights, cancellation of events in certain cities, and we're hearing that the Omicron is not nearly as severe as the Delta variant or other variants. As a matter of fact, I've heard some even equate it to the flu. So it's interesting to see what direction we're going to be going in, but I still anticipate that the Democrats will come up with some sort of scheme, some sort of plan to get that mail-in voting going, because this is their last-ditch effort. And they're doing last-ditch effort things right now. As I understand it, there's going to be over 20 retirements of Democrats coming up this year, compared to only less than that. I think it's around 12 or so, maybe 13 or 14 Republicans that are actually retiring. So you have that. And then, of course, there are people who are just simply voting Republican because they've had it with the Democrats. But nonetheless, guys, my prediction for 2022, I think things will get better in some regards, although it may have to get worse for some of these individuals to really start paying attention. But we will probably, of course, naturally, as Americans, we'll get through this. And as the world is also dealing with it too, because of the examples that the United States sets, particularly when it comes to finance and money and distribution and business and industry and stuff like that. But yeah, I am very curious to see what is going to happen in 2022 when it comes to how the Democrats are going to handle the pandemic, because as we always say, Rahm Emanuel said, never let a crisis go to waste. Thanks to all of you guys for all that you do this entire year, for supporting the channel. It's always appreciated, and I'm looking forward to the new year. All right, guys, so that's going to wrap it up for this Friday vlog. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the comments, your continued support on BitChute, on Rumble, and Odyssey, the new tech video sites that are growing quite well, actually, as well as my regular standard social media, which you can all find below this video, so make sure you're following me there. And of course, guys, if you're here on YouTube, that would be the channel icon appearing right there on the screen to subscribe. You can click on that to obviously subscribe, or use the red indicator there below the video, depending on if you're on PC or phone. So thank you guys for your continued support. I'm looking forward to the new year. You're looking forward to the new year. I'm looking forward to seeing what all happens. And of course, I will see you in the next year, next Friday, right there behind that camera.